Hello and welcome to another episode of Full Court Finance here at Zach's. I'm your host, Ben Rains. In this week, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics in the whole world, and that's college basketball and how it relates to big sportswear companies, Nike, Under Armour, and Adidas. And as many of you probably have heard at least something about it by now, that there was a big FBI investigation and the U.S. attorney from the Southern District of New York was involved, and they are coming down on college basketball and the sort of pay-for-play scandal that's going on where financial managers, the shoe companies, coaches, all of these guys are involved in funneling money in between each other, kids, top prospects, to make college basketball run. I mean, it basically runs on these shoe companies and these big-time programs getting kids at a young age, and there's so much money going on right now that these companies like Nike, Adidas, Under Armour can't afford not to be in these big-time college basketball programs. And there's so much money to be made that these big-time companies, Adidas, Nike, Under Armour, they can't afford not to be in big-time college basketball. This is where they make a lot of money. This is marketing and advertising. I mean, think about it. When these schools are on TV for 5 months straight, it's a walking Adidas, Nike, Under Armour ad at all times. It's as simple as that. So basically, we're going to get into how this all works with Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, big-time college sports, contracts with these schools, between the sportswear companies. But before we do that, I want to briefly talk about the scandal, the FBI investigation into the sort of underbelly, if you will, of college basketball and the money that's being funneled around to all of these kids in these programs. So this is the short version of this huge 100-page investigation that's only going to get bigger. It comes down to a financial advisor, Marty Blazer. In 2016, the SEC charged him with wire fraud for stealing money from some of his NFL clients for B movies. He was investing millions of dollars in B movies. They didn't want their money to be invested. They told him, don't do that. So he started doing a little Ponzi scheme action where he'd take money from a player and then give that player back someone else's money. So he gets charged by the SEC, and then we don't really know why yet, and we're not exactly sure if it's ever going to come out, why he then, as part of his sentencing, he hasn't been sentenced yet, but he basically says, hey, I'll help you guys take down college basketball. It's not sure why, but he does that basically. So he is wired up, wears video cameras, and then starts going into this world of assistant coaches, financial advisors, and the sportswear companies. And over a year and a half or so, the FBI builds a case. And at the end of September, the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York comes out and says, college basketball, we have your playbook, and it is corruption and fraud, and it's not good for you guys. So Louisville, it was the big time school that's implicated in this, and what happened there is that a top executive at Adidas, the head of global basketball marketing, James Gatto, is being implicated. He was charged for funneling $100,000 worth of Adidas funds to the family of a top high school prospect to then go to Louisville, who has a contract with Adidas. And the idea is that Adidas needs these big-time recruits to go to an Adidas school, because then maybe down the line he becomes a one-and-done guy, goes to the NBA, next big superstar. They have an easier time signing him to an Adidas contract. Even if it doesn't work out that way, big-time college basketball star wearing Adidas at Louisville is good for them, because Adidas wants as many good programs to be wearing their gear and as many good players to be wearing their gear, because it's all about the prestige of the brand for younger audiences to buy their shoes, because as most of you probably know, basketball shoes are big because people play basketball. People don't really play football besides no one's playing pickup football, I should say. So these football programs in high school and college, those kids aren't buying their shoes most often. So basketball is king here. So Adidas, Nike, Under Armour want as many schools to be wearing their gear and as many players to be wearing their shoes. And so that's what's going on. So Louisville fires their head coach, Rick Pitino, historic, legendary coach, NCAA championship winner, been at Louisville since early 2000s, used to coach at Kentucky and in the NBA. And they fired him for this. And they didn't even fire him for past scandals, which also included them. Right before this happened, they vacated their 2013 national title for basically hiring prostitutes for recruits. I mean, so they didn't fire him for that, but they fired him for taking bribes basically from Adidas to give to kids' families so they come to Louisville. And this might just be the tip of the iceberg in this situation, as there's a lot of respectable college basketball writers and people in the know that say this is going to basically implicate a lot of programs throughout the country, and it's going to expose a lot of things that a lot of people already knew were happening but didn't necessarily know specifically in numbers and who's involved. The FBI is now investigating Nike's grassroots basketball, so that's AAU, which is club level high school and middle school basketball, where you get these kids at a young age wearing Nike. So that's happening. But now we're going to get into the schools themselves, the big time programs, and the sportswear companies, and how their partnerships really help run college sports. You have Louisville signing a new 10-year, $160 million contract with Adidas as this scandal is unfolding. This happens in August. They signed this new 10-year extension, which goes on top of their last relatively small 5-year, $40 million deal. And the idea is that these schools need to have money coming in, so they get free gear, free marketing for all their programs. This is, say, soccer gets free Adidas apparel because basketball is so big that they're making money off selling basketball gear that has the Adidas logo on it. So these schools want it, and Adidas wants it because they want Louisville playing on a Friday night game on ESPN, wearing Adidas shoes, Adidas jerseys, because that's basically relatively cheap advertising. Because when I say $160 million, it's not like they're paying them cash. It's not all cash. Some of it's cash, some of it's upfront cash, but a lot of it is, say, $5 million worth of gear for your school for a year, and then marketing, and we'll pay for a little bit of renovations to your locker room or something like that. So it's not like, hey, we're paying you $15 million a year, because that would kind of be weird. And now I want to look at some of the biggest contracts and who is sponsoring the most programs out of Adidas and Under Armour and Nike, because those are pretty much it. Those three companies are really the only big global sports brands that are in the States, in NCAA sports. The biggest contract is, in fact, Under Armour. They signed UCLA to a 15-year, $280 million contract in May 2016. And that is a bunch of money up front, $15 million in cash up front, and then approximately $11 million annually in rights and marketing, and then $7.4 million a year in clothing, shoes, equipment, and then they'll pay $2 million over 8 years to do some renovations. And this is from an LA Times article that really dug into the specifics of these contracts, because they're not often public knowledge, because they don't really need to get into the specifics of these contracts. So that's the basic premise of what these huge, when you hear $280 million, oh my gosh, but it's not necessarily, like I said, cash up front. And then the other big programs that have the biggest deals in college sports with sportswear companies are Nike sponsors Ohio State for 15 years, $252 million. Nike sponsors Texas, the University of Texas, 15 years, $250 million. Nike also sponsors the University of Michigan, which helped start this huge big wave of these big new contracts. This was in 2015. They signed them for 11 years or $169 million. And one of the first really mega deals was back in 2014, and this was Under Armour sponsoring Notre Dame for 10 years. And that was kind of out of the blue. People were like, Under Armour, Notre Dame, $90 million. But Under Armour's actually helped drive these prices up, having this third party in there between Adidas and Nike. Under Armour has sort of kicked off this race of, hey, we want to be in the prestige programs who have college basketball and college football. They're all going to be wearing our gear. All the fans are going to be buying their Notre Dame polos that also say Under Armour on the other side, and so on and so on. So out of Power 5 schools, so Power 5 conferences, big-time college sports, there's 65 schools total, and then Notre Dame's included in that, even though they're not technically in one of those conferences full-time. 44 of those schools wear Nike. That's going into this season. 44 of those schools wear Nike, 10 wear Adidas, and 10 wear Under Armour. And there's one outlier, and that is Georgia Tech, and they wear Russell Athletic, and they are the only Power 5 school that does not wear either Nike, Adidas, or Under Armour. That helps paint a picture of these three companies, Adidas, Nike, and Under Armour. They drive college sports. I mean, TV rights help college sports, but these programs need this influx of money and free gear from these big sportswear companies to help their programs, help them get players. I mean, Georgia Tech might have a hard time getting big-time kids to come play at their school because Russell Athletic has no prestige. No one wears Russell Athletic gear. When's the last time you saw someone wearing Russell Athletic gear ever? I can't remember. So clearly it's important to these companies. You look at Russell Athletic, they have no market share in terms of sportswear in the States at least. So it matters to these big companies. They have to be in these programs. And it also shows their health currently overall that they can afford to do these massive $100 million deals with multiple schools. And they're also sponsoring like other schools that are NCAA schools. I mean, it's not just Power 5 schools. Adidas, Nike, Under Armour are sponsoring Division II schools, giving them free gear, stuff like that. So how is it really affecting these companies? In terms of, you hear Adidas is funneling $100,000 to one kid's family to have him maybe go to Louisville. Well, Adidas has been on the rise, and this past year, well, recently, they just passed and became the second biggest sneaker brand in terms of market dollars, passing Jordan Brand, which is owned by Nike. That's a big deal for Adidas. And sponsorships like this with Louisville and other big-time college programs can help their market share in North America because they are a German company and they have much more growth going on outside of North America. Europe specifically, that's where they're from. It's really big there. It's really big with soccer. So they need these college basketball programs who then eventually might become NBA players to get someone that's a big-time NBA player wearing Adidas shoes. That is the basic goal of all of this, is to find the next Michael Jordan per se, to get them to be a global face of basketball for Adidas. That's the goal. That's why all of these companies are doing it. That's why Under Armour's doing it at a youth level. Nike, Adidas. They need these kids early to help grow their brand in general. And Nike's North American sales have actually been down a little bit, and that has caused the stock price to fluctuate a little bit in 2017, though their next quarter revenues are still supposed to grow 2.5%, and for an $85 billion company, it's still growing, though earnings are supposed to fall a little bit next quarter and for their next full year. And Adidas, on the other hand, their revenues are supposed to pop big, a 19% jump next quarter, and earnings are supposed to jump 48% next quarter, and then 42% on the year. And in terms of Under Armour, their sales are still growing as well. They're supposed to gain 8% on the year, although like Nike, their earnings are supposed to dip a little bit, though they will still be profitable. So the sales are supposed to go up for all these companies. Earnings are down a little bit, but that's also part of a larger retail trend because the retail industry as a whole is down. So you have sportswear retailers like Foot Locker and Dick's Sporting Goods and Finish Line, where all these companies are selling their shoes. Those are down big. So it's not a trend that's just affecting them. It's affecting the whole retail industry. So they're fighting along with this, but they're not going to stop this sponsorship of college sports now, because there's no point in getting out of the college basketball game at tough times when the retail industry isn't trending, because you still need your name out there. You still need to be something people want to buy. So if you get out of the college basketball business just because retail is trending downwards and it might be affecting your profits a little bit and it might be affecting sales, you can't then say, well, we're not going to sponsor college basketball anymore, because like we saw with Russell Athletic, I mean, if you're not out there, if you're not sponsoring big schools, if you're not sponsoring UCLA, Texas, Ohio State, you don't have the youth of America who helps drive shoe sales and basketball sales. You don't have them. All of a sudden, what's the point? And people aren't going to buy Under Armour if no schools wear it. Because if you take a look at Nike, I mean, they really were nothing until they gave a bunch of money to Michael Jordan. And now he became one of the biggest, most famous athletes of all time, and Nike became one of the most recognizable companies in the world. So if you're not sponsoring, if you're Nike and you're not sponsoring the Cristiano Ronaldos of the world, then what are you doing? Because those big athletes are how you gain clout with people who wear and buy your gear. If you don't have big name athletes, then you really don't have anything as a sportswear company, especially today. I mean, why did Under Armour give all of this money to Steph Curry? Why does Adidas give $100,000 to a family of a top high school prospect? Because they hope he can become the next big basketball superstar that then wants to sign a contract with Adidas. No matter what's happening now, like with negative retail trends and maybe slower than expected sales growth, these companies, Nike, Under Armour, Adidas, are not going to stop sponsoring big-time college sports. They're not going to stop trying to have top athletes wearing their shoes, their brands at early ages with AAU program sponsorship and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, this is how you grow your brand awareness. It's how it works. You need top athletes wearing your brand because you're a sportswear company. So this isn't going to stop now. It's just going to continue. It might even get bigger. This NCAA investigation could change things. Maybe if they find out this is rampant around everywhere, everyone's giving these kids a bunch of money to high school families and stuff like that, that could change things. But for now, I would say this is only going to keep happening. Sponsoring big college programs, sponsoring youth sports. You need the athletes. You need the brand awareness. So that's probably just the tip of the iceberg, but that does it for us here today at Full Court Finance. You can check us out every Monday, and if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to shoot us an email over at podcast@zax.com. So until next week, guys, I'm your host, Ben Rains.